My father was in the British Royal Air Force. He worked on radar, he's a radar mechanic, and he was actually involved in several UFO incidents in the 1950s where strange objects were tracked flying over the English Channel and the North Sea. My dad didn't tell me until I was probably about 13 at the time. And that got me interested, and not just because it was my own father, but because he was trained in the military. He knew the difference between A, B or C. When I finished my education, I got an offer on a job. I was working on a music magazine for teenagers at the time. This is back in England in the 80s. It was called Zero, and it covered everything from music, fashion, interviews with rock bands and things like that. And so I thought, after doing that for a couple of years, well, why not try and combine the background in journalism and use investigative journalistic techniques to apply that to the UFO subject and other things that interest me, like cryptozoology. And that's what I've done ever since, really. I've done about 30 books on Bigfoot, Roswell, aliens, Chupacabra, you name it. If it's a little bit weird, I've probably written about it at some point or another. So. Why I got involved, before the people's names, which was Bernard and Hilda Ray, this was the elderly couple, they lived in Midland, Texas, and before their names were revealed, before the various sort of intricate parts of the story were revealed, I got a really weird phone call from an elderly guy in Midland, Texas, basically saying, do you know how much a photograph of a dead alien would sell? And I said, well, no, because first you'd have to prove to be a dead alien. And he said, well, I said, well, have you got, I said, have you got one? I just played along with it. He said, no, but he said, basically, I know a man who does, that kind of thing. And it was clear he was looking to integrate himself into the story. And I said, what else do you know about it? And he said, well, the photographs were in the possession of an elderly couple named Hilda and Bernard Ray. And I said, well, what did it show? And he said, like this little body in a glass tank or container or something, or a display. And I said, okay, this kind of sounded like this story that was circulating within the Dream Team, and I'd heard a few snippets, but nobody knew anything. So I contacted the Dream Team and I said, hey, I just wanted to let you know that there's somebody else who's talking about this, and if you're investigating it, then obviously you want to know that somebody else is onto it. And they were like, oh, okay, well, what did you hear? I think there might have been a bit of scepticism. And I said, well, the guy gave me the name of the couple who owned the slides, or took the slides, and there was a bit of a silence. And I said, they said, what names did they give you? I said, Bernard and Hilda Ray. And there was this sort of hushed, silence. And then it was revealed to me that, wow, you've been given the names of the people that we've been keeping under wraps. From there, other snippets started to surface, like, for example, the Rays supposedly having deep links to President Eisenhower and his wife on a friendly basis. And Bernard Ray was a geologist, and part of his territory in his job was actually New Mexico and also the Roswell region. We know he covered extensively in New Mexico. It's almost inconceivable that he would never have gone to one of the most famous caverns in New Mexico, which is called the Carlsbad Caverns. Literally only a handful of miles from the caverns, up until actually only about 10 years ago, there was an old museum built in the 30s called the $1 Million Museum. And this is in a town called Whitestown. Whitestown is literally a 10-minute car drive from the caverns. Now, the $1 Million Museum was home to like 30 or 40 child-sized mummies. It also had on display the preserved heads of like 9 or 10 animals. Now, all the displays were identified on little placards in pen. They were written in pen rather than typed out. And this is what we see in the Roswell slides. We've got a small body that looks like a mummy, and behind it is an animal's head on a stand with its own little placard. And the placard is handwritten, just like at the $1 Million Museum. So even though it's just a working hypothesis, because of Bernard Ray's connection to New Mexico, with his job as a geologist, with the Carlsbad Caverns being somewhere he would surely have visited, and then the museum just a couple of miles from the caverns, I actually think there's a distinct possibility that at some point him and his wife Hilda, they went out to the Carlsbad Caverns. From there they stopped off at the $1 Million Museum and took a bunch of photographs. And I think that could well be where the images were taken. Personally, I do believe something very, very strange did happen at Roswell. I think the big tragedy is if the Roswell slides as an issue and as a part of Roswell fall apart and collapse, and it is proved to be a mummy, I think a lot of people, particularly in the media and the general public and within the UFO community, it's going to have an adverse effect on Roswell. You know, I think a lot of people from now on may dismiss pretty much anything that's said on Roswell because they're going to say it's the slides issue again, which was a follow-on from the alien autopsy issue. So I think that's the big irony and the tragedy, that the slides are, I think, at least in my personal opinion, are going to have a negative effect on the entire case. And what I'm trying to impress upon people is that even if the slides do fall down, we've still got a substantial body of very credible people who, over the last 30 years or so, have spoken out publicly on what happened at Roswell, and we should never forget that. Well, I actually had a bit of a busy year. I've got a new book out this month called Secret History, which is, it looks at, it's not just a UFO book, but it goes back to sort of ancient astronaut mysteries, but also, was there a conspiracy around the death of President Lincoln? Who was Jack the Ripper? Did Hitler survive the Second World War? Area 51? Death of Princess Diana? Things like that. Then in August, I've got a book out called Bloodline of the Gods. This is, part of it deals with the ancient past, part of it deals with now. But it focuses on this issue of people who have Rh negative blood and their ties to the UFO subject and paranormal phenomena. There's a theory that people with Rh negative blood, that it's an ancient lineage that goes back through Cro-Magnon man and possibly like a genetic manipulation by the gods, so to speak. Then in September I've got an A to Z book on Bigfoot. And also in September I've got a book called Chupacabra Road Trip. My other big interest is cryptozoology, which is Bigfoot, the Loch Ness Monster. And I go on a lot of expeditions, and over about the last 10 years I've been on numerous expeditions to Puerto Rico, Mexico, around the US, looking for the Chupacabra. So I've got a busy year.